So we just found out a little while ago who is going to be enshrined as part of the 2018 Pro Football Hall of Fame class in Canton, Ohio. And my initial reaction is they got it right. Sure, I would have loved to have seen somebody like a Tony Brazile or a Joe Jacoby, maybe an Everson Walls, be able to make it this go-round, especially for Walls and Jacoby, because I believe it was their last year of eligibility, and now they go off to the senior committee. But when I look at this class is outstanding. Like, even if you have a player preference of, I feel like this guy maybe should have gotten in this time, how could you really argue against any of the 8 people that ultimately comprise this 2018 Pro Football Hall of Fame class? I just don't see how you could argue against their worthiness. I specifically look at the senior committee nominees and the contributor nominee, and I say these were honors that were way, way, way overdue, and I'm glad previous wrongs have finally been righted. I look at Robert Brazile. He was a great linebacker for those Houston Oilers teams in the 1970s and early 80s, a 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, member of the 1970s All-Decade team. You know, it took a long time for his former teammate Elvin Beathard to finally get in, and it took a long time for Brazile to finally get in. But here is a guy that to me was one of the 10 best players that was not already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and that has finally been rectified. And when you talk about a guy like Lawrence Taylor, Robert Brazile was a bit of a pioneer in that he came before LT, and as the Oilers went to the 3-4 defense, he was really one of the first edge rushing 3-4 outside linebackers to be utilized in that way. So I'm incredibly ecstatic that he got it. I'm also ecstatic beyond belief that a Green Bay Packer, I know it seems strange as a Bears fan to say this, but right is right. And as a person that loves sports and loves the history of sports, loves Hall of Fames, right is right. And who am I to deny somebody their rightful place? After all, I'm not a Hall of Fame voter because they denied Jerry Kramer his rightful place for decades. Decades. Here's a guy, not only was he a 5-time All-Pro and a 5-time world champion, including being on the first 2 Super Bowl championship teams with Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers, he was a member of the 1960s All-Decade team and a part of the NFL's 50th anniversary team. So what that meant at that time was in the first 50 years of the NFL, they thought at that time that Jerry Kramer was so great, he should be part of that 50th anniversary team. Yet here we are almost 5 decades after he played his last snap in the National Football League, and he had yet to be enshrined in Canton. It was a crime. It was outrageous. It was ridiculous. Again, just like Brazile, one of the 10 best players not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame by my estimation. And in 2018, they finally got it right. Because to me, this was starting to break down similar to a Ron Santo type of situation where you wait too long and then the honor comes and the call comes too late. I did not want that call to come too late for somebody like a Jerry Kramer. He deserved that spot. It was merited. It was earned. It was well overdue, and it finally happened. And then I look at the contributor category, and you look at Bobby Beathard. And I mean, no slight to a guy like a Ron Wolf or a Bill Polian, some of the greatest general managers in the history of the league, Hall of Fame worthy for sure, but Bobby Beathard was better than both of them. And the resume speaks for itself. Bobby Beathard took over the Redskins in '78, and he ran them for 12 years as their general manager. During that time, he built a team that ultimately went on to play in 4 Super Bowls and win 3 of them with 3 different starting quarterbacks. And the one thing he closest had to a franchise quarterback was the guy that quarterbacked the first 2 teams that went to the Super Bowl that won it in the 82 season, lost it in the 83 season to the Raiders. That was Joe Theismann. And this was a guy that was inherited from the George Allen regime, who George Allen thought so much of initially. He had him playing special teams and wide receiver in part because Joe Theismann was just begging to get on the dang field. But Bobby Beathard built that Redskins team to where over the course of a decade, a little bit more, they went to 4 Super Bowls and won 3 of them. And sure, by the time they had won that 3rd Super Bowl, In the 91 season, he was already off to San Diego. It was still ultimately the team that he built. And then you look at when he went to the Chargers between, I think it was 90 and 2000. In that 11-year stretch, he built the Chargers into being a relevant, viable team. And they went to the Super Bowl with Stan Humphries as their quarterback in that 94 season. So you're talking about a team that was the architect for two different franchises that went to the Super Bowl. Teams that he directly was responsible for building went to 5 Super Bowls. 5 Super Bowls in a, 13-year stretch? Between 82 and 94, 13-season stretch? Ron Wolf didn't do that. Bill Polian didn't do that. Bobby Beathard was better than both of them. I was stunned that it took so long to get him into the Hall of Fame. He clearly earned it, clearly deserved it, and I'm glad he finally got his spot. So when I saw those 3 names, as much as I was focused on other guys and wondering about them and hoping they got in, these were the guys I was the most anxious to see. I'm like, they can't leave out Brazile and or Kramer, can they? They got to put both of them in, because why not? You have the room to put them both in. Put them both in. They deserved it. And then Bobby Beathard clearly deserved it. And the 5 modern era players all clearly deserved it. And it's crazy too. My impression of this class of 5 of the modern players, the first thing that really jumps out to me is I was able to watch all 5 of these guys the entirety of their career and actively, vividly remember it. And that's pretty cool. Means I'm getting older, yes, and that's sad. That sucks. But oh well, such is life. But all 5 of these guys, I remember watching them in college, for the most part. And I remember them when they were rookies and young players and became veterans and became stars, superstars, what have you. But yeah, it works out. Like, I look at Ray Lewis. The jokes I make about him aside, I watched him at Miami, and I knew he was undersized, but I knew he was a stud. I knew he was an absolute stud. Even back as a young 13, 14-year-old kid. What was I, 14 at the time? I knew he was a stud. I knew he was going to be that business in the National Football League. Hall of Famer, I don't know about that, but I knew he was going to be a stud. I knew he was going to be a star. You just watch a guy and you know it. And you can't deny it. Clearly a first-ballot Hall of Famer. One of the greatest linebackers in the history of the game. 7-time All-Pro, 13-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 2-time Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, 2000s All-Decade team. Like, Ray Lewis's resume screams out, no duh, first ballot Hall of Famer. And then Randy Moss. I know I've told the story before, and I'll tell it again. But I'll never forget watching Moss at Marshall in 97 a couple of times. And I saw him, and it was man crush from the jump. I saw him and I said, oh my God, I want him to be a Chicago Bear. Like, for months, all I thought about when it came to the Chicago Bears is, I want Randy Moss to be a Chicago Bear. And I remember I finally got my dad to watch some of Randy Moss at Marshall, and I'm sitting there and drooling all over Moss's potential and talking about how he's that dude. He is my number 1 player in this draft, ahead of even Peyton Manning. He's going to be that guy. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. And my dad, Peter Arnold, sat there and said, you're absolutely right. And it's a good thing the Bears won't draft him, because they would make him a gunner on punt returns, and they'd make him a coverage guy on kick returns. They wouldn't know what to do with him. And it was depressing and it broke my heart. But I knew deep down he was probably right. And I remember that draft day in 98 because at the time I was a junior in high school. I was running at the Rochelle Hub Relays in Rochelle, Illinois. And as we got to the line, the Bears were coming up on their pick. So there were people at the football stadium where we had the track meet. They were listening on the radio for updates. So before I got ready to run the 4x8, I asked if the Bears had made their pick yet, and they said no, but probably going to make it to the next 10 to 15 minutes. So, of course, run the anchor leg. As soon as I get done with the race, I'm not even worried about the race at this point. I'm worried about whether or not they took Randy Moss. And then somebody told me they didn't take Moss. I said, who the hell did they take then? Because how could you screw that up? They took Curtis Enos, and I threw the baton. I don't even want to know how far. I got our team disqualified from that race. That's my big Randy Moss story. And then, of course, I remember watching him on Thanksgiving Day of his rookie year. The three catches, all 3 for 50 yards or more, 3 touchdowns. He beasted on Jerry Jones' Cowboys. But, man, you talk about that rookie year in 98 was just incredible. The 17 touchdown catches. Still a record for most receiving touchdowns by a rookie. Most overall receiving touchdowns in the season with 23 that he had in that great 2007 Patriots season that came also close to perfection but didn't quite get there. 2000s all-decade team. 5 times he led the league in receiving touchdowns. He had 10,000-yard seasons. He's second all-time in receiving TDs. 4th in total TDs. 4th in receiving yards all-time. I mean, to me, even with some of the off-the-field stuff over the years, Randy Moss was clearly a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Like, to me, after Jerry Rice, Randy Moss is the second greatest wide receiver in NFL history. That's the way I look at it. Second greatest wide receiver in NFL history. And the most dynamic, explosive playmaker on the offensive side of the ball. He was everything that Deion Sanders was to me on the defensive side of the ball. So clearly he was meriting first ballot honor. I didn't know that he was going to get it, but I'm glad they did the right thing. Brian Dawkins, he played, 16 seasons in the league. He was a 9-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, part of that 2000s All-Decade team. And you look at Brian Dawkins, he was the heart and soul of that Eagles team that played in 5 NFC Championship games, went to a Super Bowl in 2004 season. He was that dude. Like, there's no question. He was the stud of studs on that Eagles defense. He was the heart and soul in a lot of ways of that entire team. While McNabb was the quarterback of that team and kind of a de facto leader, I always felt like the real stud, the real leader of that team was Brian Dawkins. And he was the guy most worthy of the Hall of Fame from those Eagles teams of the 2000s. And here we are, he got his due, and it was well-deserved indeed. And then we get to Terrell Owens. And I didn't know if this was going to be the year or not. And I know some people are going to talk about the antics that he had over the years, the way he was a distraction to his team, that he was selfish, he was me. A lot of guys throughout the history of sports get into Hall of Fames and they're selfish and they're me. Like a lot of the people that will sit there and talk about a guy like Terrell Owens being me will overlook the fact that somebody like Ted Williams, a splendid splinter, was incredibly selfish at times and very much a me player, and nobody disputes him being a first ballot Hall of Famer or a Hall of Famer in general. Now, granted, it's different sport, but similar premise here, and it just points out that sometimes history allows us to gloss over certain inconvenient truths with guys. But here's what you can't deny. He was a 5-time All-Pro, led the league in receiving touchdowns 3 times. He had 8 seasons where he went 10 or more receiving touchdowns, and 7 of those 8, it was 13 or more. So he made plays. He was a playmaker. He made big plays happen. He's second all-time in receiving yards, third all-time in receiving touchdowns, 9,000-yard receiving seasons. And I look at some of the big moments in the playoffs. That playoff game in the 98 season against the Packers where he makes that spectacular catch to win it for the 49ers in like triple coverage. Steve Young throws this ball up as kind of a wing and a prayer, and there goes T.O. who hadn't caught crap all game, and he makes the big play and they win. Now he's crying and everything else. But I really look at Super Bowl in that 2004 season after he broke that leg on that horse collar tackle. He's out. He's missed several weeks. What's he going to do in the Super Bowl? Is he going to be the same T.O.? Because in 2004, he was great. He was absolutely great. He was an integral part of where the Eagles got before he got knocked out late in the regular season with that broken leg. Man, when he came into that Super Bowl, he was dynamic. He was a force. 9 catches, 122 yards. It was like T.O. took over that game for stretches and at times. And to me, when I saw that performance, I'm like, man, this dude someday is going to be a Hall of Famer. And while you want to talk about the stuff with him and McNabb and doing the sit-ups in the driveway and some of the dumb crap that he did over the years and the Sharpie in the freaking sock and doing the pose at the star and all of that, I understand why people focus on that. I also like to focus on the positives. And there were positives with this guy. He was a big-time playmaker, a weapon for a decade plus in the NFL, and at times he made big plays happen for his team. Look at some of his playoff numbers. They're not bad, especially in San Francisco and Philadelphia. They are not bad. He earned his spot. He absolutely did. Statistically, he most certainly did. And while he didn't get in on the first ballot, at least he finally got in. So now he can be happy and everybody can stop complaining about it. And then we get to me, the guy, I wasn't sure if he was going to get in on the first ballot, but I was hopeful he was going to. And that's Brian Urlacher. My Urlacher story is as such. In 1999, I had graduated high school. I'm working at a grocery store, Eagle Country Market, around 11th Street, Rockford, Illinois. And so I'm on my own, but it sucks. It was me, and if any of you remember from watching the wrestling channel, my cat Precious, that's pretty much all I had. I was living in this studio apartment that was sucked. It was roach-ridden. It was all of that. You know, we all got to start somewhere. But I remember I would get home, and at least at the time, I had cable. And then when I couldn't pay that bill, I had satellite. But you get the point. I would watch some of these late-night ESPN games, and there would be New Mexico, and there was this big freaking athletic freak of a white boy named Brian Urlacher. And I saw him, and I knew. And I'm like, oh, my Jesus. This is the next great Chicago Bear. Like even in that fall of 99, I'm like, this is the next great Chicago Bear. I knew it. Like, you see it, you know it. And we're in that draft, people are talking about in 2000 guys like Courtney Brown and LeVar Arrington and Chris Samuels, and you know, other people are talking about in the draft range where the Bears are going to be, because they were ended up picking ninth in that draft. You hear a lot about Thomas Jones and Plaxico Burress. To me, it was Urlacher. I knew he was that dude. I knew he was that guy. I knew he was a future Hall of Famer. And I sat there on that draft day in 2000. I even took the day off work to be able to watch the draft in 2000. Because when it came down to picks 7 through 9, I knew Mark Hatley at the time prioritized it as such. He wanted Plaxico Burress, Thomas Jones, then Urlacher. Thank God the Cardinals and the Steelers made the choice for him by taking Jones and Burress. Because when the Bears had to turn in their card at the 9th overall pick, they had no choice at that point but to take Brian Urlacher. And I was so happy. I can't even describe it. All the draft frustrations over the years with the Bears at different times. It was one of the happiest moments I've ever had as a Bears fan, honestly, was the day they drafted Brian Urlacher in 2000. Because I knew things were going to change quickly. And they did. Now, granted, Dick Duran tried to start him out at strong side linebacker because Dick Duran didn't know what the hell to do with him. And to be fair, a lot of other people in the league probably wouldn't have known what the hell to do with him. But they certainly didn't know what the hell to do with him. He struggled in his first game. They benched him and put in Roosevelt Colvin. Then Urlacher sits out a game. Then Barry Minter, who was a solid middle linebacker in the NFL. He was a solid player for the Bears. He was one of the few bright spots on that Bears team in the late 90s on the defensive side of the ball. He gets hurt. When you talk about Wally Pipp in baseball and talk about Lou Gehrig replacing him, and Wally Pipp saying it's the most expensive headache he ever had. Well, for Barry Minter, it was the most expensive injury he ever had because he got pipped. Because Urlacher came in and he never looked back. Urlacher was beyond question the franchise player for the Chicago Bears for over a decade. In the Wanstead years before him, they didn't do crap. And when you look at it, after the 13 seasons Urlacher spent in Chicago, 5 seasons since, the Bears haven't been to the playoffs once. They haven't done crap. It's more than just being an 8-time Pro Bowler, a 4-time All-Pro, a Defensive Player of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, member of the 2000s All-Decade team. It's the impact, being a part of 4 division championship teams, being a part of a team that went to the Super Bowl in that 2006 season, played in Super Bowl 41, and helped lead him there without Tommy Harris and Mike Brown, 2 of the real studs of that defense. When you look at Brian Urlacher and his impact, he changed the way people looked at the cover 2, because before the cover 2 was about getting pressure on the edges and pressure up the middle and, different philosophies in terms of your secondary and your coverages, especially your zones. Urlacher changed it because he could cover so much range in the middle of that defense, man. It was truly otherworldly. I mean, He could do things that, Derek Brooks was great in Tampa, but he was an outside linebacker. Urlacher's playing in the heart and soul in the middle of that defense, and he could cover so much ground and get so much range and make so many plays, sideline to sideline, line of scrimmage to goal line. I mean, he was just incredible. And it always pissed me off so bad when you would have so many people in the media and some fans too talk about he was overrated and he was this great white height, in part because they were jealous of how he came into the league and he wrecked shit from day one. And it was him and it was Michael Vick in the 2000s, especially the first 5 to 6 years of the 2000s. They were the most popular players in the National Football League. They were the #1 jersey sellers. They were the biggest box office draws for the NFL. And it's that simple. It was not Peyton Manning. It was not Tom Brady. The two biggest stars in the NFL, in my estimation, at least the first 5 or 6 years of the 2000s, were Michael Vick and Brian Urlacher. And they were guys that came in and were entirely different. They were guys that changed the way the game was played at their positions and the way people evaluated the position. Both Vick and Urlacher did that. They were incredibly symbiotic in that way. And Urlacher was just... If you didn't get to watch Urlacher at the height of his power and the peak of his career, I feel bad for you. And you should be jealous of me because I was able to do that. But he was that dude. He was that dude for the Bears. I cannot emphasize again how much of a franchise player he was. Typically, good organizations, great organizations, make the franchise players quarterbacks. Maybe it's a running back. But for the Bears over the years, some of their franchise players have been Hall of Fame middle linebackers. Bill George, Dick Butkus, Mike Singletary. And I'm happy to say in 2018, on only his first try, Brian Urlacher takes his place at the table and takes his rightful place, more importantly, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. This was a great class. Everybody that got in deserved it. Some guys that have been wrong for so long got their justice. And for me personally, Urlacher is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I always felt like he was, and on Saturday, I was validated. He was validated. I hope the Pro Football Hall of Fame voters get it as right again next year as they did this year. The only other gripe I have at this point is, can we get Steve Sable in the Hall of Fame, please?